Welcome students in our today's online English class. Today we are going to study a lesson for the students of class ninth. The name of the lesson is The Bond of Love. This is the ninth chapter of your Beehive book. The story The Bond of Love is a story of love and affection between a human being and an animal. So let us begin the chapter. I will begin with Bruno, my wife's pet sloth bear. I got him for her by accident. 2 years ago, we were passing through the sugarcane fields near Masur. People were driving away the wild pigs from the fields by shooting at them. Some were shot and some escaped. We thought that everything was over when suddenly a black sloth bear came out panting in the hot sun. Now, I will not shoot a sloth bear wantonly, but unfortunately for the poor beast, one of my companions did not feel that way about it, and promptly shoot the bear on the spot. As we watched the fallen animal, we were surprised to see that the black fur on its back moved and left the prostrate body. Here, wantonly means for no good reason. Prostrate means lying on the ground facing downwards. Here, narrator starts with Bruno, the pet bear. He got it by accident. The narrator found a bear cub by chance when he and his friends were passing through the fields of sugarcane near Masur. People were driving away the wild pigs from their fields by shooting at them. Then they spotted a sloth bear. His friends shot towards the bear and it died. After the sloth bear died, they found the black fur on its back moved and left the dead body. Then we saw it was a baby bear that had been riding on its mother's back. When the sudden shoot had killed her, the little creature ran around its prostrate parent, making a pitiful noise. So here, when narrator's friend shoot the mother bear, her cub, which was riding on her back, ran around her dead body, making a sad noise. I ran up to it to attempt a capture. It scooted into the sugarcane field. Following it with my companions, I was at last able to grab it by the scruff of its neck while it snapped and tried to scratch me with its long hooked claws. Here, scooted means ran away, scruff means back. Here, narrator tried to capture the small cub, but he ran into the sugarcane field. He was chased by narrator and his companions. At the end, narrator was successful to grab it. We put it in one of the gunny bags we had brought, and when I got back to Bangalore, I duly presented it to my wife. She was delighted. She at once put a colored ribbon around its neck, and after discovering the cub was a boy, she christened it Bruno. When narrator captured the baby cub of bear, he put it on a gunny bag and he gifted the sloth to his wife. She was very happy to see the little cub and she put a colored ribbon around its neck. When she found that the cub was a boy, he called the cub Bruno. Bruno soon took to drinking milk from a bottle. It was but a step further, and within a very few days he started eating and drinking everything else. And everything is the right word, for he ate porridge made from any ingredient, vegetables, fruit, nuts, meat, curry, rice, regardless of condiments. and chilies, bread, eggs, chocolates, sweets, pudding, ice cream, etc., etc., etc. As for drink, milk, tea, coffee, lime juice, aerated water, buttermilk, beer, alcohol liquor, and in fact anything liquid, it all went down with relish. Soon Bruno started drinking milk from a bottle, and narrator's wife treated him as her own child and took good care of him. She gave him many things to eat and drink. He ate porridge, vegetables, fruits, nuts, meat, rice, eggs, tea, etc., and drank tea, milk, beer, coffee, etc. The beer became very attached to our two Alsatian dogs and to all the children of the tenants living in our bungalow. He was left quite free in his younger days and spent his time in playing, running into the kitchen, and going to sleep in our bed. Here, narrator says Bruno spent his time in playing with the pet dogs of the narrator and his tenants' children. He slept in their beds. One day, an accident befell him. I put down poison, barium carbonate, to kill the rats and mice that had got into my library. Bruno entered the library as he often did, and he ate some of the poison. Paralysis set into the content extent that he could not stand on his feet, but he dragged himself on his stumps to his wife, who called me. I guessed what had happened. Off I rushed in the car to the vet's residence. A case of poisoning, tame beer, barium carbonate, what to do? Here, narrator describes an incident. Once, an incident took place in the house. The narrator had put down a rat poison in the library, and Bruno ate it and suffered a stroke of paralysis. He dragged himself to the narrator's wife. They took him to the veterinary doctor and he recovered after some time. But before it, he had to suffer a lot. When narrator took him to doctor, the doctor had to find out his treatment. Out came his medical books, and a feverish reference to index began. What poison did you say, sir? Barium carbonate? Ah, yes, barium salt. Ah, barium carbonate. Symptoms, paralysis, treatment, injection off. Just a minute, sir. I'll bring my syringe and the medicine. So here, the doctor was searching the medicine for the beer cup. A dash back to the car, Bruno still floundering. Floundering means struggling to move about on his stumps but clearly weakling rapidly, some vomiting, heavy breathing with heavy flanks and gasping mouth. So the Bruno was still struggling to move on his own feet. He was weak and he had some vomiting, heavy breathing, and with heavy flanks and gasping mouth. He was looking too much weak. Hold him, everybody! In goes the hypodermic. Bruno squeals. 10 cc of the antidote enters his system without a drop being wasted. 10 minutes later, condition unchanged. Another 10 cc injected. 10 minutes later, breathing less stertorous. Bruno can move his arms and legs a little, although he cannot stand yet. 30 minutes later, Bruno gets up and has a great feed. He looks at us disdainfully, as much as to say, what's barium carbonate to a big black bear like me? Bruno is still eating. Here, the doctor treated him with a 10 cc injection or antidote of the poison. But one injection was not enough for him. So, after 10 minutes, doctor gave him another injection of 10 cc. After 30 minutes, he felt good and he stood up on his own feet. He looks at all of them hatefully. Disdainfully means hatefully. And it seems that he was saying, what's barium carbonate to a big black bear like him? Bruno is okay now. Another time he found nearly 1 gallon of old engine oil, which I had drained from the stump of the Studebaker and was keeping as a weapon against the inroads of termites. He promptly drank the lot, but it had no ill effect whatever. Here, Studebaker, an old American car. Here, narrator describes another incident. Another time, Bruno drank 1 gallon of old engine oil, but it had no ill effect on him. The months rolled on, and Bruno had grown many times the size he was when he came. He had equalled the Alsatian in height and had even outgrown them, but was just as sweet, as mischievous, just as playful, and he was very fond of us all. Above all, he loved my wife, and she loved him too. She had unchanged his name from Bruno to Baba, a Hindustani word signifying small boy. Here, as time passed, Baba grew in size. Here, Bruno grew in size and equaled the two dogs in height. But he was still as sweet, as mischievous, as playful as before. He loved all of the members of narrator's family. Narrator's wife changed his name from Bruno to Baba. It is a Hindustani word signifying small baby. And he could do a few tricks too. At the command Baba wrestle, Baba box, he vigorously tackled anyone who came forward for a rough and tumble. Give him a stick and say, Baba, hold gun, and he pointed to the stick at you. Ask him, Baba, where is baby? And he immediately produced and cradled affectionately a stump of wood which he had carefully concealed in his straw bed. But because of the teenage children, poor Bruno or Baba had to be kept changed most of the time. So as Bruno grew, he learned some tricks, and at the narrator's wife's command, he could perform them. He could hold a stick like a gun when she said wrestle or box. He did the same. She changed his name to Baba. Baba had to be changed most of the times of the children of narrator's tenant. Due to the children of narrator's tenant, he had to keep in chain. Then my son and I advised my wife, and friends advised her too, to give Baba to the zoo at Mysore. He was getting too big to keep at home. After some weeks of such advice, she at last consented. Hastily, and before she could change her mind, a letter was written to the curator of zoo. Did he want a tame bear for his collection? He replied yes. The zoo sent a case from Mysore in a lorry, a distance of 87 miles, and Baba was packed off. Curator is a person who is in charge of the zoo. As you know, Baba is grown up now. So, narrator and his friend advised the narrator's wife to send him to the zoo in Mysore because he needed a bigger and open space. She was not ready to send him initially, but later she agreed and sent him to the zoo. Narrator called the curator of a zoo, and the person sent a case for Baba, and he was packed off. Now, we all missed him greatly, but in a sense we were relieved. My wife was inconsolable. She wept and fretted for the first few days. She would not eat a thing. Then she wrote a number of letters to the curator, How was Baba? Back came the replies, well, but threatening. He refused food too. Here, fretted means worried. Here, narrator describes his wife was in grief for weeks after Baba left. She wrote a letter to the curator of the zoo to know about Baba. She left food for him too. After that, friends visiting Mysore were begged to make a point of going to the zoo and seeing how Baba was getting along. They reported that he was well but looked very thin and sad. All the keepers at the zoo said he was fretting. For 3 months I managed to restrain my wife from visiting Mysore. Then she said one day, I must see Baba. Either you take me by car or I will go myself by bus or train. So I took her by car. One day, narrator's friends visited Mysore and they begged to make a point of going to zoo and seeing how Baba was getting along. Means how he was. They went to zoo and they asked to curator what was the condition of Baba. They answered he was threatening. He denied to take food. The narrator tried to keep his wife away from the zoo for about 3 months. But after knowing Baba's condition, she decided to meet them. She said to narrator that either he take him by car or she will go herself by bus or train. Friends had conjectured that the bear would not recognize her. I had thought so too. But while she was yet some yards from his cave, Baba saw her and recognized her. He howled with happiness. She ran up to him, patted him through the bars, and he stood on his head in delight. The narrator took his wife to the zoo. Some of her friends told her that Baba would not recognize her, but when she went to the zoo, Baba recognized her at once and became very happy. For the next 3 hours, she would not leave the cage. She gave him tea, lemonade, cakes, ice cream, and what not. Then closing time came, and we had to leave. My wife cried bitterly. Baba cried bitterly. Even the hardened curator and the keepers felt depressed. As for me, I had reconciled myself to what I knew was going to happen next. Oh, please, sir, she asked the curator, may I have my Baba back? Hesitantly, he answered, Madam, he belongs to zoo and is government's property now. I can't give away government property. But if my boss, the superintendent and at Bangalore, agrees, certainly you may have him back. There followed the return journey to Bangalore and a visit to the superintendent bungalow. A tearful pleading Baba and I are both threatening from each other. Will you please give him back to me? He was a kind hearted man and consented. Not only that, but he wrote to the curator telling him to lend us a case for transporting the beer to Bangalore. So here the beer cub and narrator's wife sat together for 3 hours. She gave him food. She urged the curator to send Baba with her, but he was helpless and suggested her to ask the superintendent for that. The superintendent allowed her to take Baba and he was hoisted on the top of the narrator's car. He also arranged a cage for transporting the beer to Bangalore. Back we went to Mysore again armed with the superintendent letter. Baba was driven into a small case and hoisted on the top of the car The case was tied securely, and a slow and careful return journey to Bangalore was accomplished. After taking back Baba, narrator and his wife started their journey back to Mysore. They put the case on the top of the car, and the case was tied securely, and they completed their journey. Once home, a squad of coolies were engaged for special work in our compound. An island was made for Baba. It was 20 feet long and 15 feet wide, and was surrounded by a dry pit or moat, 6 feet wide and 7 feet deep. A wooden box that once housed fowls was brought and put on the island for Baba to sleep in at night. Straw was placed inside to keep him warm, and his baby, the gnarled stump, along with his gun. The piece of bamboo, both of which had been sentimentally preserved since he had been sent away to the zoo, were put back for him to play with. When narrator, his wife, and the bear came to their house back, a wooden box was kept for Baba to sleep. He was happy to be at home again. The narrator made a 20 feet long and 15 feet wide island for the bear. The narrator's wife and Baba spent hours sitting there. She kept all the belongings of Baba in that island. In a few days, the coolies hoisted the case onto the island, and Baba was released. He was delighted, standing on his hind legs. He pointed his gun and cradled his baby. My wife spent hours sitting on the chair there while he sat on her lap. He was 15 months old and pretty heavy too. Here, hoisted means raised by means of rope or pulleys. After few days, Baba was released on the island. He was delighted, standing on his hind legs. He pointed the gun and cradled his baby. Narrator's wife spent lots of hours sitting on the chair when and while the bear sat on her lap. It was 15 months old and pretty heavy too. The way my wife reaches the island and leaves it is interesting. I have tied a rope to the overhanging branches of a mango tree with a loop at its end. Putting one foot in the loop, she kicks off with the other to bridge the 6-foot gap that constitutes the width of the surrounding pit. The return journey is made the same way, but who can say now that a sloth bear has no sense of affection, no memory had no memory and no individual characteristics. Narrator's wife used to go in the island. It was very interesting. Narrator tied a rope to a branch of a mango tree, and he hanged a loop at its end. His wife used to put his one foot on the loop, and by the second foot she used to push the another. Thus she used to bridge the 6-foot gap. This is due to the love and affection of the bear toward narrator's wife and her love toward the bear. Here in the story, the affection and love between narrator's wife and Baba was a symbol of true love. The story shows that animals also feel love and express their feeling to them who love them. Baba showed so many qualities like that of human, like love, affection, care, and loyalty, and shared a bond of love with the narrator's wife. So that's all for the day, students.